This message comes from Mint Mobile. Starting at $15 a month, make the switch at mintmobile.com/switch. $45 upfront payment for 3 months. 5 gigabyte plan equivalent to $15 a month. Taxes and fees extra. First 3 months only. See terms.
This was never about the health of Black women. This was about creating a boogeyman, which is the hypersexualized, dangerous Black man who walks around horny and just destroying everything with his lust.
And so it becomes almost like a community criminal, right? But the reality is that most Black gay men, one point in our lives, we were DL.
Allow me to take you back for a second to the daytime TV of yesteryear. The year is 2004. I remember sitting in my living room, well, my parents' living room, watching Oprah with my mom. And there was this conversation about DL men. That's men on the down low, meaning that they are discreet or secretive about having sex with other men.
Not even let's have any kind of relationship beyond sex?
If I was gay, yes. But when you're on a DL, all you want to do is have sex. Okay. It's about gratification, not orientation.
That was 2004. But now it's 2026. And if you open up TikTok right now, you'll hear the same thing.
Okay, so how to tell if your man is DL. So this is something important for us to talk about.
The DL man is a recurring character in Black culture. Someone who comes up in messy story times, as a cautionary tale, or even as a reason to explain away bad behavior from straight men.
If he beats on women, I promise you he's DL.
So I'm trying to understand, what is it about our culture, and maybe this moment specifically, that has us so obsessed with the dealings of DL men? Specifically at a time when people are being surveilled and scrutinized for their sexual behavior. To find out, I'm joined by Dr. Jeffrey McCune, author of Sexual Discretion, Black Masculinity and the Politics of Passing.
Thank you for having us.
And Kai Wright, a journalist and host for The Guardian who has been writing about sexual politics for the last 30 years.
Thank you, Brittany.
I am so happy to have you both. Hello, hello. I'm Brittany Luce, and you're listening to It's Been a Minute from NPR, a show about what's going on in culture and why it doesn't happen by accident. Today, we're going to talk about men on the down low. So who are the first people using this term on the down low, and what kind of person were they describing?
Yeah, it's so important to identify the down low as a vernacular term used within Black communities to describe things that we did very discreetly, right?
Hello. Yes. Like if you're getting information you weren't supposed to have.
Yes.
Maybe if someone were to buy boosted goods, let's say. You,
on the low.
On the DL.
Yes.
Exactly.
And then it moved into, sexual discreet, right? And so, I got this girl number on the down low. I got this dude's number on the down low. This notion of the down low was really current within Black communities. And then in the late 90s, early 2000s, moved into a kind of popular cultural term, right? But I like to say that it's really important to think about the down low even further than the 1980s and 90s, like the Underground Railroad, right, was a down low activity to keep us out of the harm of surveillance. And so the politics of the DL for me are historic, right? It's a way to keep out of the lines of harm and also surveillance.
I would say, as somebody who was writing about sexual politics and intersections of race and politics in the 90s, the first time I was asked to explain outside of the community what is down low was, in fact, when a guy named J.L. King wrote a book that became a bestseller because he was booked on Oprah Winfrey in 2004 to go on and talk about the book. And he presented himself as a down low man, which he described as somebody who was secretly having sex with men, even though outwardly his life was as a straight Black man.
And just to make sure we're on the same page, it sounds to me like being DL is distinct from being discreet.
Or closeted. Yeah. I think that we had reached a point where there is widely accepted and understood that people had identity around their sexuality, right? But this was a group of people who did not have identity around their sexual behavior. Their behavior and their identity were distinct things, which is different from somebody who is just in the closet, who's saying, look, I think of myself as gay. I just don't want you to know that.
Got it. So just to, again, make sure we're on the same page, DL men might have sex with other men, but do not identify as gay.
Mm-hmm.
Why did that distinction of having sex with men, but not being gay, why did that matter to people?
Because it was a moment in which the Black community was finally starting to understand how big a deal the HIV epidemic was for us specifically, and how high the infection rates were amongst Black women, and looking for explanations for why that was happening. Where was that coming from? The answer became, oh, this must be because of these DL men.
Which was proven to be a large misconception. It's not true that DL men were responsible for the high HIV rates in Black women. And if you want to know more about that, you can actually check out an episode we just did about safer sex. But back to this Oprah episode. This came out in 2004, and I started college at HBCU in Washington, D.C. in 2005. Truly, that framing from that one episode of Oprah and the way that it started a million barbershop and beauty salon conversations, being a young Black woman at an HBCU in Washington, D.C., where at that time, the HIV transmission rates were of the highest in the country. And there was especially concern about the diagnosis rates and transmission rates for Black women who had sex with men. And so, at that time, I could tell that among my classmates and the girls in my dorm, there was a lot of panic, not so much about the actual, perhaps unprotected sex that they were having with the guys in their life, but more so about like the imagined unprotected sex that other men were having with other men who might have been only 1 or 2 degrees separated from them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It makes entire sense.
It makes a lot of sense. And I really want to hone in on the kind of way in which the rising rates of HIV amongst Black women worked in tandem with the kind of what I call the pop version of the DL, right? The DL becomes used as a ploy to get us to move our attention away from so-called sexual behavior, sexual health, sexual wellness, right?
Yeah.
To a so-called DL character. And for me, that does 2 things. It allows us to be distracted from the ways in which we can really save Black women's lives. We know that a very small percentage of men are DL men who actually have sex with women, right? And so that's one piece that we knew then, and we still know that today. But the other piece that we know is intravenous drug use was also at its increase, and that also created transmission in different ways. So I think we got hoodwinked, if you will, by this whole kind of conversation that Oprah was having, and lost kind of focus on the health and wellness of the whole Black community.
And I think we really cannot understate this. It's to put a fine point on it. This was never about the health of Black women. This was about creating a boogeyman, the latest version of something we are very familiar with, which is the hypersexualized, dangerous Black man who walks around horny and just destroying everything with his lust. And we put that on straight Black men, we put that on gay Black men. That is part of the way we have slandered Black men for 300 years.
So when people are talking about, even just a cursory search of social media, you will see white people talking about DL this and DL that, which to me it feels like a big shift. But when people are talking about a DL man today, what do you think they're describing?
What I think we have today, right? We've got lost in this kind of commercialized version of the DL. And the only way we do that is through these kind of salacious narratives, right? I know this man, he was married to, this famous, beauty queen. And then he got with this famous producer director man. And oh my God, I gotta tell this story. I need to expose him, right? And so it becomes almost like a community criminal, right? But the reality is that most Black gay men, one point in our lives, we were DL. DL in the sense that we were discreet because we didn't want anybody to do harm to our bodies, to kind of provoke us in the church, to provoke us in our community. We didn't want anybody to actually bash us. So the safest way to be was discreet, right? And so the notion that so many Black gay men now are like online trying to expose DL men, I always ask, go back 30 years with yourself or 20 years with yourself. Would you have wanted somebody to expose your development into sexuality?
And I look at the discourse today online around DL, folks. What I find notable is how adjacent it is to anti-trans discourse.
Oh, say more about that.
You see them side by side. We are obsessed in this culture with false binaries, and particularly with false binaries around race, gender, and sexuality. You have to stay inside whatever box we have decided exists for that category, because those boxes exist in order to create a caste system. And anybody whose existence challenges the boundaries of those boxes, it becomes an outcast in society. People start coming for them. And people whose sexual behavior and sexual identity don't match challenged the idea of like there's straight people and there's gay people and here's how they get ranked in society. And I don't think it is coincidental when you think of it that way that right now you would see this surge in conversation about DL men when we are in a moment of retrenchment around caste in the United States. That is what this moment politically and culturally is about. The Trump movement is about, can we put everybody back in the boxes in which they belong so that we can rank them and say who's on top and who's on bottom. And so in that culture, in that moment, lo and behold, here comes the DL monster again, as this weird thing that doesn't stay where it's supposed to stay.
You know, I'm glad you're bringing this up. It makes me think of something I saw recently on social media, which is this viral content creator called the DL Whisperer.
Yeah.
Part of his whole thing is teaching, straight women how to identify DL men, which is that's his own thing. And then on top of that, though, to your point, Kai, he also has a lot of anti-trans rhetoric. And very recently, he expressed a desire to physically fight T.S. Madison. For those who don't know, T.S. Madison is, she's a diva of all trades, but most prominently, she does a lot of like hosting, podcasting work, television. She's acted. Many people might remember her as being featured prominently on Beyonce's Renaissance album. She's somebody who is very proud about her entire journey as a Black trans woman. So it doesn't surprise me, based on what you just shared, that his anti-trans rhetoric is also existing aside this. We're gonna pull the curtain back on all these DL men, and I'm gonna teach you women how to deal with it. We did reach out to the DL Whisperer for comment, but he did not immediately respond.
And it just makes me sad, honestly, Brittany, when I see any kind of nominally queer discourse that is about reinserting us into boxes and policing us in boxes. It is deeply, deeply disappointing.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things you're pointing to, Kai, that I really like is there have always been DL men, trade, right? Men who have sex with men who don't identify as being gay or bisexual in our communities, right? But it's now profitable to expose those men, right? On social media, on television, right? Across the internet, right? Like it's profitable. But for me, I'm really trying to, understand what are the motivations for people who want to kind of create new Black criminals. Because I'm not one of them. I'm not interested in creating some new Black criminals. We got enough folks,
New Black criminals. Coming up.
But somehow the DL codes for a certain kind of truculent masculinity, a kind of like, dare I say, thug masculinity, or lay it down masculinity, that people are, as much as they are repelling this, they are attracted to it.
Stay with us.
This message comes from Mint Mobile. This holiday season, stop overpaying for wireless and switch to Mint. Shop 50% off unlimited plans at mintmobile.com/switch. Limited time offer. Upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12 months. Taxes and fees extra. Initial plan term only. Above 35 gigabytes, network may slow when busy. Capable device required. Availability, speed, and coverage varies. See mintmobile.com. This message comes from Grainger. Grainger knows that as an HVAC technician, you and your digital multimeter are in high demand. So when a noisy office HVAC turns out to be a failing blower motor, you don't break a sweat. With Grainger's easy-to-use website and product information, you can select the product you need to keep everything humming right along. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done. This message comes from Babbel. Babbel's conversation-based language technique teaches you useful words and phrases to get you speaking quickly about the things you actually talk about in the real world, with lessons handcrafted by over 200 language experts and voiced by real native speakers. Start speaking with Babbel today. Get up to 55% off your Babbel subscription right now at babbel.com/NPR. Spelled BABBEL.com/NPR. Rules and restrictions may apply.
You know, these days, the term DL is sort of used as a catch-all term to define people of all backgrounds who are closeted in some way. But why is race important when it comes to talking about who or what a DL man is?
With these terms, they do start to lose meaning over time. And so, if you go on the apps, there are men of all kinds of walks of life. They're calling themselves DL, including very openly gay men, who are, who are like, for today I'm DL, and
tomorrow, who knows?
Tomorrow, who knows? And that I love, to be honest, everybody try on what you need to try on today. That's great. But the problematic DL conversation that recurs is necessarily about Black people because it, again, is a character that is this vessel in which we pour a wide variety of fears and fantasies about Black male sexuality into, as opposed to having conversations about those things.
Can I add something that I think that we can't leave this conversation without talking about how the DL has historically also coded a certain relationship to masculinity.
Yeah.
So somehow masculinity is tethered to who you sleep with. And we know there's a range of masculinities even amongst heterosexual men, right? I go to churches all the time. There's a range, baby, especially in the South, right?
True, true.
But somehow the DL codes for a certain kind of truculent masculinity, a kind of like, dare I say, thug masculinity, or lay it down masculinity, that people are, as much as they are repelling this, they are attracted to it. And so the reason why it stays popular is because I also want to, like I said, I can't leave this conversation without talking about the DL as a sexy metaphor.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's right.
The imaginings of the DL is all about this kind of image of this really tall, dark, and handsome brother in the shadows, right? And there's a reason. There's a reason.
Because that is also sexual. That is also sexy, as Jeffrey is pointing out.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Why does the idea of the DL man fascinate people so much, especially straight people? Like, who benefits and who is harmed by the existence of the DL trope and all the attendant myths?
We're all harmed by the existence of this trope because it is the thing we do instead of having the conversations around desire that we need to have. And so that leaves us all less joyful and less safe. We need to be creating a sexual culture where everybody through a whole range of sexual behaviors and identities are able to express their desire and have consensual relationships around it. There is a world in which Black women are expected to exist in relationships where they don't have consent. They cannot give consent to what their male partner is doing when he's not at home. And those are terrible problems that need to be addressed. But the solutions to those are more complicated and harder than creating this DL monster. He is not explaining the problems in your relationship.
So he's not the number one reason why you're having man problems.
And we know, and from a simple fact base, we know from data, it's absolutely not the cause of HIV infection rates.
But what happens though inadvertently is because there's such a small population of men who are having sex with men and women, right? Inadvertently, what actually happens is a resurgence of homophobia against Black gay men, right? Because who are these men supposedly having sex with? The husbands are having sex with so-called Black gay men, right? And so again, the Black gay man becomes the enemy of the heterosexual relationship. And so for me, what I'm really concerned with is that we're once again giving license to a certain kind of homophobia within our community and advancing this kind of antagonism towards Black gay men as being these kind of mysterious lures, right? We're luring these preachers into the closets of sexuality. We're luring these businessmen into the bathhouses of the streets of blah, 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 blah. Like all of these mythologies that keep running wild. And the DL Whisperer is one of the people who of course advances that, right?
Well, also too, I mean, there's also like something that shows up a lot in popular culture. I mean, I'm thinking about, of course, the Tyler Perry film For Colored Girls.
Who's doing the bending?
Yes, with the famous line, "Who's doing the bending?" Where Janet Jackson's character, she receives a positive HIV diagnosis, and the audience is supposed to understand that this happened because her husband was stepping out on her with another man. Or even thinking about like Insecure, the HBO show, where Molly's big issue with the guy she's dating is that he's openly bisexual and was comfortable telling her about dating a man in the past. Like, she has the idea that there's some Black gay man in the past that is a threat to their current heterosexual romance and their possible future. Like, these ideas are reproduced through entertainment and are making people a lot of money. So, you know, as you all say, it's not just the DL Whisperer online. It's not just the conversations that people are having amongst themselves in real life. This is also something that is fascinating enough to a general, predominantly straight audience that this boogeyman is reproduced over and over again in culture. And this brings me to a question. You know, it seems like the DL archetype is a form of misplaced fears and anxieties. What is a more productive way to think about the way some Black men are navigating their sexual and social lives?
I think one of the productive ways is to understand that men who have sex with men who do not want to actually take on the moniker gay or bisexual is actually announcing to our community how the terms gay and bisexual are treated, right? If in fact we lived in communities wherein being gay and being bisexual was celebrated.
Not just accepted. I want to note that you use the word celebrated.
Yeah, was celebrated, was acknowledged, was seen, right? If we could actually have that kind of community, then we would have folks who might be, right, more able to be visible and public. Now, I say might because folks who are discreet about any identity still have to answer to an anti-Black world that continues to police and surveil them and do violence. But in the Black community, I think one of the things that we can do is create the conditions under which celebration is our first move as we think about people's articulations of identity.
Kai, Jeffrey, I've really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you both so much.
Thank you so much, Brittany.
Thank you. Thank you. This is riveting.
That was Dr. Jeffrey McCune, author of Sexual Discretion, Black Masculinity and the Politics of Passing, and Kai Wright, a journalist and host for The Guardian who has been writing about sexual politics for the last 30 years. This episode of It's Been a Minute was produced by
Corey Antonio Rose.
This episode was edited by
Nina Patak.
Our supervising producer is
Barton Girdwood.
Our VP of programming is
Yolanda Sanguini.
All right, that's all for this episode of It's Been a Minute from NPR. I'm Brittany Luce. Talk soon.
This message comes from Schwab. Everyone has moments when they could have done better. Same goes for where you invest. Level up and invest smarter with Schwab. Get market insights, education, and human help when you need it.
This message comes from MIDI Health. CEO Joanna Strober shares why they started a virtual care platform for women in perimenopause and menopause.
Our goal at MIDI is to make sure that all women have access to really expert care, starting around 35 and 40, making sure that they get access to all the things that can help them thrive as they're growing older.
MIDI Health, committed to helping women in midlife with perimenopause and menopause care, accessible via telehealth visits at joinmidi.com.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Charles Schwab. Financial decisions can be tricky. Your biases can lead you astray. Financial Decoder, an original podcast from Charles Schwab, can help. Download the latest episode and subscribe at schwab.com/financialdecoder.